Okay, so, welcome. I'm Brian for the Unbound Series channel, and today's going to be a bit of a somber video. I, I have been a fan of Marvel probably since I want to say since I understood what a superhero really was. And the first solo superhero that I was exposed to as a kid that I remember and loved was Spider-Man. You guys probably figured out from that where I'm going with this. Today, Stan Lee passed. And I am saddened by that because he was a guy who created, I think, some of the greatest superheroes of our generation. You know, or of the past generations, or you know what I mean? He's the guy, he's the reason why we have this awesomeness, Like, he's the reason, we have that stuff. Like, he's the reason that any of that even became as popular as it has was because of Stan Lee. I mean, the guy touched everybody in such a way that it was impactful for people like me. Some of you don't know this, but he's one of the inspirations for the reason I wrote my book. If you don't know, I wrote a book. It's called Unbound: The Spirits Awaken, and it's set in a place of like the supernatural and that kind of thing. And it's a very kind of dark, twisted universe I created. But Stan Lee was one of the writers that inspired me to write my own story because that's what he did. I mean, I've seen some of the interviews when he was creating Spider-Man, which I think was probably his one of like the two most important creations he ever made. His editors didn't want the story. They didn't care. They thought nobody would read it because teenagers can't be superheroes, and heroes aren't supposed to have problems and things like that. Well, he challenged that line of thinking, and it paid off in the end. And Stan Lee, in another interview I saw, and you can thank Comic Explain for this, he talks about how he can't stand things like bigotry and sexism and racism, and some of like his most iconic characters are based off historical figures, like Professor X being based off of Martin Luther King, and that is really. It really speaks to who he was as a person. Stan Lee, and unfortunately, I never got the chance to meet the guy, and I'll forever be saddened by that because he was one of my literary heroes. I wanted to meet him someday, and I won't get the chance, but it is what it is. The point of me making this video is I just want to honor the man in some way. Because, he was an inspiration. He was, I think he's very much one of the people who probably shaped my generation's sense of morality, in the fact that we are, we can't stand bigotry either. We don't judge people based on their skin color for them, and I'm speaking for majority, not for all, but, we don't base on people's skin color. We don't base their judgments off of how much money they make, or who they prefer to love, what their religious views are. Our generation just doesn't care about those things. And I think Stan Lee, especially for me personally, had a hand in creating that, because I learned from an early age that you don't judge a man based, you don't judge a human, based on the cards they were dealt. You base your judgments on them based on the actions they take. And that is the only thing of merit that you can judge another human being on, is their actions. And I think Stan Lee really taught that. He also, I think, is the reason why I have a deep disdain for people who abuse power. Because, you know, like the big Spider-Man quote, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that if everybody who had power took that to heart, you would see our world would deeply change overnight. Anyway, so at the end of this video, I'm gonna have a quote from Stan Lee, something preferably inspirational, because that's what I want to leave you guys on. Because heroes should be remembered for their inspirations. And the cool thing about heroes is, this is something I've always said, the cool thing about heroes is they don't really die. They live on through those they teach, and through those that they inspire. So, as Stan Lee would say, Excelsior.